Kim Foxhoven, and I am a gluten practitioner, and I've been trained to read food sensitivity tests. So that's really my specialty. And I also have been trained by Dr. Stewart and advanced genomics. So I enjoy, reading the 23andMe gene tests, and it gives a lot of indication as to how someone's immune system is functioning and neurologically how they're functioning. I got into this originally about 7 years ago when two of my older kids were sick. My daughter was 5 at that time, and my son was 7. And my daughter had horrible stomach pains and muscle issues, like she couldn't walk up the stairs at night. She was too tired. She sat on the couch all the time. She was not a typical 5-year-old at all. And then my son had some major OCD, a lot of anxiety, and low muscle tone. He couldn't, his focus wasn't great, but he was a very bright kid. So anyway, I kind of started to addressing things, doing food sensitivity tests first, and they both came back highly sensitive to gluten, which gluten is a huge inflammatory food for your system. So they're suffering from a lot of inflammation. And then I took them to go see Dr. Stewart, and he figured out that they cannot methylate, which was another reason why they had so much inflammation. They couldn't break the inflammation down. And he also did about 3 hours of testing on them and found that they both had been vaccine injured when they were younger, probably 2 and 3 years old. So he gave them both some antivirals, started them on methylate, started to get their body methylating again. And I'll go over methylation, what it is. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, but may not completely understand what it is. And probably within 2 months, they both did 180s. Before, my son was also very aggressive, and I kept thinking in the long run, I really feared for my other kids' lives from him, because he was just violent and not nice. But all of that subsided when he started methylating again. So had I not taken them to see Dr. Stewart and really kind of figured out their biochemistry and what was going on, I couldn't even imagine where I would be today. It scares me to even think about that. So I'm going to share my screen and get my PowerPoint, and so we can learn a little bit about genes and methylation and what it is. Okay. All right. So genes that are affecting your everyday life. And genes are epigenetic, so you always have the same DNA your whole life, but you can change the way your genes express themselves by food and supplements, things like that. So you can turn genes on and off. And some adult syndromes that require gene testing, I'll recommend somebody, there's few things I'd recommend, but one of them is definitely some gene testing. And those are migraines, vertigo, fibromyalgia or chronic pain, neuropathies, which is like tingling in the hands and the feet, ADHD, autism, tics, seizure disorders, post-concussion, cancer, anxiety disorders, depression, Alzheimer's, infertility, hormone dysregulation, and diabetes. So that's mainly for the adults. And then for children, the syndromes you want to look at for gene testing are migraines, asthma, eczema, food sensitivities, seizure disorders, autism, ADHD, and Asperger's, speech delay, immune dysfunction, POTS in teenagers, and exercise intolerance, low muscle tone, post-concussion syndrome, and social anxiety syndrome. So I see a lot of kids that that come to me for food sensitivity testing, and a lot of them fall into also this range as well. So I usually always recommend a gene test as well. So the genes that we're going to be looking at today are methylation. How well are 250 different cellular processes in your body working? Your neurotransmitters, are they producing enough of the serotonin, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, epinephrine, and GABA? And detoxification, how well can you excrete toxins and break them down, get them out of your system? Mitochondria is your powerhouse, so how well are you creating your ATP for energy? And then lastly, inflammation, probably one of the most important, and how well can you get rid of oxidized stress or oxidative stress? And why do we care about methylation and what it is? So methylation is a complicated biochemical process. So I'm going to try to simplify it and like to use like a parking lot type of analogy, where you have many cars in the parking lot. All of them have different bells and whistles, but what they have in common is that they need oil and gas for them to work. So that oil and gas is folate, or methylated type of folate, and also methylated B12. So for a lot of people that have these gene SNPs, they have to have the methylated, the broken down methylated usable form in order for the body to then get those 250 different biochemical processes working properly. So the methylation is used in major functions such as neurotransmitter production, cell turnover and repair, membrane function, energy function, and immune function. Therefore, problems with methylation will affect the cellular delivery, epigenetics, and intercellular functionality of almost all cells. So these are like, you're going to see kids that are really, really sick, and a lot of the doctors really aren't looking at this area. They're looking for major, gene defects to figure out what disease the kids have. But this is part of, how that child handles the disease or adult, and how they break down inflammation and get rid of it. And if they can't, then they can't heal. So you're going to see a lot of kids that aren't healing, maybe taking all the drugs. Not that, drugs are more of a Band-Aid, but they'll be taking things and trying to heal, but they can't, because they can't get these processes working. Here, this is kind of just an overview of if you have a methylfolate deficiency, what that's going to look like. So you have poor neurological healing, mitochondrial weakness, inflammatory activation. You'll have poor dopamine, serotonin, which means poor emotional stability, poor motor skills, fine motor skills, and immune weakness. So this is, I like this kind of helps you visualize what happens when you have proper folate and B12. It's the bucket theory. So that folate and B12 dumps into the mitochondria bucket, which then empties into the growth factor bucket, and then into the immune system bucket, and then the neurotransmitter bucket. So when those all are full, you're functioning at a optimal level. When you have sick kids, sick adults, they have a healing crisis, and typically they've got gene SNPs in their methylated genes. So they can break some of the folic acid down and some B12, and it goes in the mitochondria bucket. That kind of dumps into the growth factor, and then you have very little that gets into the immune system, and very little that also makes it, and a lot of times not much at all that makes it to the neurotransmitter bucket. So some of these kids have delayed growth because even that growth factor bucket's not getting filled very well. So you see a lot of deficiencies and a lot of neurological and immune function issues. And oh my gosh, Benny's music. So, embarrassing moments at a gene party. That's for your entertainment. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go into a sample gene report. And first I want to show kind of how we coded it. Their alternative forms of given genes are called allies, and they can be dominant or recessive. And when an individual has two of the same, whether it's dominant or recessive, for that gene. Make sure everyone's on mute if you can, because it's hard to hear. And then heterozygous means having one ally. So when you have no mutation or no SNP, and a SNP is referred to, sometimes you'll see it'll say SNP, and that's a single nucleotide polymorphism, and that means it's a mutated gene. Okay, so the green is no mutation, so you have no SNP copies. Heterozygous is you have one copy, and the homozygous is you have two copies. Okay, and that's typically, the red is typically not what you want to see, even yellow. So here's I'm going to give you kind of a sample client I've had recently. Is an 18-year-old male. He's had mild fatigue, severe depression, almost to a point of suicidal thoughts, anger outbursts, and he's been susceptible to viruses and bacteria, and he's had brain fog. Okay, so here's the methylation portion of the gene test that I look at. So I pull these genes from a 23andMe gene test, and a lot of times the doctors will, you can go to a doctor's office and they'll just, a lot of times now they'll test for methylation, but they only test the MTHFR677T and the MTHF, it should be an R, A1298C. Those are the only two you're going to get, which do not give you a full picture. They give you a little bit of an idea. The C677T is probably the the worst of the two, and you can methylate about 50% with that one, and then the 1298C about 70%. So a lot of times if the doctors see the 1298C heterozygous for that, which you have one copy of, only one copy, they're like, oh, you're fine, don't worry about it. You can break down folic acid enough to where it's turning into methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is a usable form of folic acid. So, but this gene report is going to give you a better picture. So you look at those two genes. If you're heterozygous for those first two, that decreases methylation by 50%. Then you have the FLR2, and either the 1 or 2, that will decrease your methylation even more. So the FLR2 for this client is another 10% less methylation. And then the MTHFD1 is another 10%. So now this client's down to methylating about 30% of what they're taking in. So not a very good amount. And then further down, the MTRR, that's your B12. So you're gonna that's important, as well as the MTRR. So the MTRR on this client is a homozygous, so it's red. It's a genetic weakness, and if you remember before, I said that the B12 and the folic acid both have to be functioning properly. You can't just have folate and then if you have no B12, that whole wheel does not turn. If the wheel doesn't turn, the other wheel doesn't turn either, that's all your neurotransmitters, your immune system, and everything. So you have to have both functioning properly. So this client will also need a methylated form of B12. And so a couple of the other genes, the TN1, TCN2, both of those are also SNP'd. So that's another, just absorbing the B12 issue. So he definitely needs both methylated forms of both. Okay, now his neurotransmitters. He's got the COMT-Val 158 MET as a heterozygous. That so this gene, if you have no SNP in this gene, then you're like a happy-go-lucky. Everything kind of rolls off your back. You're heterozygous, and then is, then you are just like, they call it the stoner gene. You're kind of just like, hey, that's all right, we'll get over it later, and you're not happy or mad, or you're just kind of there. And then if you're homozygous in it, then you're just mad all day long. So you just do not come out of disappointments well, or depression well. It just hang out longer. The MAOB is basically, for him, he's homozygous here, which this is, he needs more dopamine. This is your depression gene, basically. So that will explain a lot of his depression and severe depression. And then the GAD1 is typically for, GABA, and he doesn't make GABA well. A lot of he's not able to convert glutamate into GABA. And so when you have high glutamate levels, you're going to see a lot of aggression. And that's, one of the symptoms too, is aggression. And he didn't know why he got just mad and angry all the time. So that helps to explain that. Mitochondria is not too bad. He's functioning about 80%. There's a couple in there that are weakened, so there's some supplements that will help to strengthen those mitochondria that I typically recommend. So that's a short slide. Now this is the gene that I'm missing, the MAP gene. Okay, so detoxification. His detoxification is okay. You're looking at here, you want to see good genes for glutathione. Glutathione is your master detoxification gene, or your ability to detox is through glutathione. Can you produce it, and can you produce enough to fight enough free radicals and stuff like that? So for him, the SOD gene is really important, and he needs to up the antioxidants in order to break down oxidized stress. And then the NAT2 is also important for him, because right now what's happening is his liver is not clearing a lot of the toxins that come in, either chemicals and stuff like that. So he's got a congested liver, according to also some other blood tests. And then inflammation. So I said this is one of the biggest things that I look at is inflammation, because that is other than methylation is probably the most important, but then again, you don't want to start methylation until the inflammation is down, because when you have high inflammation, that methylation may make it worse. So the genes here that are important for him, the IL-5 is just, he probably has some more allergic, like when, especially in Austin, it's terrible here. So you're going to see a lot more allergies with that gene, and some autoimmunity as well as IL-13. Really, you're going to see more autoimmunity issues there. That he's no mutation there. As far as I know, he doesn't have an autoimmune disease. So the three most important genes for inflammation are the CTLA4, the C3, the CD14, and he has SNPs in all of them. So all that inflammation caused by, food sensitivities, and I did do a food sensitivity test on this client, and they had a high gluten sensitivity, but he has not taken gluten out of his diet. So that's another reason he is suffering, is because he's continuing to put that in his body and create a lot of inflammation. So there's really, if you have these genes, there's no off switch. So you can't turn the inflammation off. And, you know, that's where you're going to see, like with head injuries and stuff like that, those will just, you know, you'll have headaches for, you know, up to a year, 6 months to a year with concussions when you have these genes that can't turn the inflammation off, because it just is an inflammation cascade. So you want to be able to have the off switches. You also have to be very careful with vaccines if your child has these genes, because that's kind of where things go wrong with the whole, you know, and with vaccine injuries, is they cannot break a lot of those chemicals down, and they can't get the inflammation out of their system. So it really gets stuck in there. And that's what happened with my kids. They didn't react very well to vaccines. So there's a population out there that doesn't do well with them. The DAO is a histamine gene. If you have that, you typically have a harder time breaking down histamines. And so you're going to have symptoms like nausea, maybe some heartburn or burning in your stomach. And it can be severe, or it can be just a little bit, you know, depends on how well you can break it down. But there are supplements, His-Block, that you can take that help you break that down. So I wanted to also note the FUT2 gene here, because that is more indicative for having to take a probiotic daily if it's heterozygous or homozygous. He's fine. He has no SNP here, but it's, I just wanted to make you aware of that gene, because your good bacteria is not able to repopulate very well if you have that. So you definitely need a probiotic daily, versus someone else like him. He probably doesn't need it daily. He probably needs, you know, maybe a couple times a week or something. LA-DQ-A and the DQ2, those are genes for celiac or gluten sensitivity. And his is showing heterozygous for 1. And then the VDR-TAC is also another important one that I wanted to point out too. Even though he has no SNP here, this is important to look at, because you want to see how well you're absorbing vitamin D. If you're heterozygous or homozygous for this, you have to take a D3 plus K2, where your body does not absorb the D alone. So, it's very challenged in absorbing the D. So you've got to get a supplement that includes the K2 with it. And that K2 will also help place calcium into the bones correctly. So it's always good. Imperative if you have the TAC gene. The NOS2 gene is that's responsible for immune system function. So like I said before, this in fatigue, exercise intolerance is another thing. This client and he was susceptible to viruses and bacteria. So that makes sense looking at that gene. And the genes aren't, each individual gene is not an end-all be-all. You really want to look at the whole pathway and how that pathway is functioning. You know, how many SNPs do you have? How many, you know, some SNPs mean nothing. But, you know, we picked out some of the most important SNPs that do mean something and that make a difference. So that's what you're seeing here. If you just looked at, if you had another report, you pulled other genes, there's other methylation genes, other inflammation genes, but typically they don't make you're not going to see a big difference in someone's health. So my conclusion with this client is his methylation ability is only at 30%. So he's a very poor methylator. Neurotransmitter production is really suffering. So his serotonin and dopamine levels are low and the glutamate levels high, making him aggressive. Mitochondria is slightly weakened at 80% function, and detoxification is challenged by low levels of glutathione and impaired liver detoxification. Inflammation doesn't have a strong off switch, so inflammation will be more severe and not last much longer than it should. These aren't Weight Watcher diet pills. You've been reading them upside down, silly lady. Okay, so basically what I would do for this client is, and I can't prescribe drugs, but I would send him to somebody who could, because he has no off switch. Whereas low-dose naltrexone is a great off switch for people that don't have that off switch, and it will decrease inflammation, increases food. There's really no long-term side effects to it, and it just improves the immune system overall. It's an immune system modulator. Also, there's a supplement called PEA Soothe that helps to decrease inflammation as well. It doesn't work as well as the LDN, but it's helpful. So first step would be to decrease the inflammation. Probably give that about 3 weeks, and then I'd start the methylation process, where you're going to be giving him some methyl complete, which has the broken down form of the methyl-tetrahydrofolate, methylated B12, and P5P, which is the B6. It's a usable form of B6, and D3 in it. So we'll start open up those pathways to the nervous system using that, and that way he can start then producing more neurotransmitters. And then about 2 to 3 weeks after that, I would add in some amino acids to help those SNPs working properly to work better. So some GABA, which will calm his nervous system and will help the glutamate levels to decrease. NAC, which improves glutathione levels, and PQQ, which helps the mitochondria become stronger. And magnesium and zinc are something that a lot of the population is deficient in, and those are really essential minerals for things to be working properly. So you really need to make sure that those levels are adequate in any health situation. And then D3 too, you want your D3 between about 60 and 80 to function properly, for other things to function properly. Like, if anything under 40 is really hard for your thyroid to work. So, and D3, every cell in your body uses it. And then I would also probably recommend some advanced neurotransmitters, and maybe eventually some SAMe to help with depression. A lot of just getting rid of the inflammation through diet and lifestyle and your environment, that's key. And that's going to be the first thing you want to do to help lower the inflammation. So you really do have to look at the gut and food sensitivities, because casein and gluten are super inflammatory foods. And, if he doesn't cut gluten out, he will continue to have some problems. They may not be as severe once we started this other stuff, but he's not going to see it completely go away until he definitely gets the gluten out of his diet. And that's something that he's, everyone makes their own decisions on stuff. So, and then the supplements that I mentioned above are by Neurobiologics. They're Dr. Stewart supplements. He's created them based on a platform of all his clients that have a lot of these mutated genes. So he's combined the right amounts in the right formulas to help a lot of these gene mutations. And tips for improving methylation: to eat as many leafy greens as you can, because they're going to get the folate. You'll definitely want to be taking a methylated type of bee product. And to support methylation with supplements, you want to make sure that you're getting adequate amounts of magnesium and zinc. Take a good probiotic and reduce stress, alcohol, smoking, and And then for boosting your glutathione levels for detoxification, you want to make sure you're just having enough proteins that have enough amino acids in them. And eat sulfurous foods like broccoli, onions, garlic, cauliflower, and cabbage. Take protein powders when you can, unless, a lot of either vegan protein or if you're not allergic to whey's a good form as well. Selenium plays a huge role in the production of glutathione. And you want to optimize your antioxidants, make sure you get enough exercise and enough sleep. And you can use some herbs to help detoxify your liver, like milk thistle. And then curcumin or turmeric also helps raise the glutathione levels. And just like your body and lifestyle can be healthy or unhealthy, the same is true with your beliefs. Your beliefs can be your medicine or your poison. It's very true. And how do I get tested? So if you want to get tested and you're interested in this for yourself or your child, I recommend there's the 23andMe gene test, because you do get a lot of genes and information from that. It's typically around 150. You can find it on sale, which every once in a while, or on a regular basis. So it's $99. I will do the gene interpretation if you need that. So I just need log in to 23andMe, and then I pull those genes, and I charge like around $150 for that. So, anyway, that sums it up. Does anyone have questions?
I do, Kim. It's Megan.
Okay.
That was awesome, by the way. So, like, for example, that young man that you're working with, so is that something that he will stay on forever, or is that something that just kind of he course corrects his genes respond, and then, do they have to take all of that forever? I guess.
Right. That's a good question. The methylations, yes, because those are genes that he's turning those on and making them work. So in order for them to work, yes. Now, if he decreases his inflammation, some of he's going to have better neurotransmitters, and a lot of other processes are going to work better. So he may not have to take as much, or he can probably cut back on definitely the mitochondria supplement. But I think for him, he's probably always going to have to take LDN, and he'll always have to take a methylated form of B's.
How would you know if he is getting better? Is that you have to run the gene test again, or? No,
the gene test will always be the same, but you'll know if he's getting better if his depression symptoms, his aggression symptoms are diminishing. He's just happier, feeling better.
Okay.
So.
All right. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Kim, for sharing your talent and your gift with all of us. And I have seen different doctors, and I've never had it explained so practically and very simple so I could understand. Your presentation was incredible. And I wanted to just let all of you know that I have come to Kim and done the gene interpretation myself, and it provided so much insight for me as well. Originally it was just for Cheyenne, but when I chose to do it on myself, it gave me so much insight that I feel like I could look out even more for Tlaian, and my whole family. I think once you understand your own, you're even able to help your children more. But I wanted to also say, Kim, if you could give 3 practical takeaways from today, something very practical, what would you suggest?
I would suggest eating more vegetables, leafy greens. That's going to help you with all your methylation, some of your methylation. I would also highly recommend getting a gene test done, because those do always stay the same and you can use that throughout life. Should anything go wrong. There's also a pharmacogenetics test that your insurance will pay for once in your lifetime. And I think that's another important test to get done, because it will tell you how you process drugs. Like if you go into the hospital for a surgery, which pain medication is going to work best for you. There's been people that the morphine doesn't work for them, and it's because of metabolizers. So you want to know that information before you go and have somebody, do surgery on you. So that's an important test as well. And then I think the third thing is really trying to understand your food and how you feel. Just pay attention to how you feel when you eat certain things, because there are foods, it can be your medicine or your poison. Foods, make a big difference in what you're putting in your mouth and how processed things are. And then I'm going to give you a fourth one too, increasing your magnesium and your zinc levels, and D3. Those three are real important.
I wanted to go along the lines with what you recommended with the food allergy testing, because I got that done as well through Kim, thank goodness. I actually get it done almost once a year now. But along the lines of not knowing sometimes when something very healthy can be affecting our bodies, I was having these bouts of extreme exhaustion where all of a sudden I just felt like I was going to fall asleep standing up, and I couldn't figure out why. And it'd even be after I had my almond milk latte or something that I thought was like I should have energy. Anyways, I was talking to Kim. She had me get the testing done, and I am severely allergic to almonds. But the allergy I was having was it would just make me feel extremely exhausted. So I was thinking there was something a lot larger wrong than what was wrong, and it was that. And it was something that was easy to switch, but was causing me not to feel good throughout the day, because I had incorporated almonds in so many different aspects, whether it's a bar or almonds or almond milk, and it did make a huge difference.
Good, yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people get their tests back and they're like, well, I thought kale was good for you. I thought, these things are good for you. And yes, they are, but a lot of times you have a leaky gut, so they're not going to make you feel well if you're eating them often. And, once you close the gut up and take some of those foods out for a little while, then your body can heal, and, you feel much better. You can add some of them back in again.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kim, is there any other questions, anyone? We are so lucky to have Kim, who I truly believe is the most intuitive person of Austin. She always knows where to guide you if you need guidance. And I just hope that everybody that's listening today really utilizes the gift that we have with her being part of CC4C. If she can't answer it, she really knows where to kind of direct the path.